You're listening to the Journey Podcast. What happens when ancient shamanic wisdom meets the cutting-edge discoveries of neuroscience? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we delve into the intriguing world of Neuro-Shamanic Therapy, a novel approach that blends modern neuroscience with the wisdom of shamanic healing practices. We discuss how this innovative therapy aims to heal the mind and body by bridging the gap between ancient healing traditions and contemporary scientific understanding. Laura Martinez is a multifaceted professional, seamlessly merging her roles as a therapist, spiritual healer, author, speaker, and meditation guide. Drawing on her scientific training and expertise in psycho-neurological issues, Laura enriches her approach with a deep understanding of shamanic practices, a legacy she inherited from her great-grandmother, the renowned healer Guadalupe Galvan Rivera. Rooted in Mexiquito, Texas, Laura's ancestral lineage has been a wellspring of healing wisdom, with her great-grandmother, affectionately known as Lupe, being celebrated for her curandero practice and a unique blend of spiritual insight and psychological acumen. Laura delves into the transformative processes that echo Lupe's practices, employing rituals, cleanings, and energy work to address internal obstacles, unraveling the intricate connections between negative psychological imagery and neurological patterns that ensnare and haunt our lives. Laura guides individuals through life challenges, viewing them as opportunities for growth. Her sessions are a fusion of neuroscience techniques, therapeutic approaches, and shamanistic practices tailored to meet the unique needs of each client. With a rich background in behavioral neuroscience research, Laura served as a research associate at Texas A&M, focusing on the impact of lead in the brain on addictive cocaine use. A licensed chemical dependency counselor and licensed professional counselor, she directed a psycho-neuroplasticity center in Texas for 8 years, contributing significantly to the understanding of chemical dependency. Here is my interview with Laura Martinez. Hi, Laura. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because neuro-shamanic therapy is such an interesting topic for today's conversation. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really excited. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on, Petra. I have been listening to your podcast and I'm so excited to record with you today.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I look forward to diving into this. It's not something that I talk about every day, so I'm very curious to learn more about it, and I'm sure our listeners are as well. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your story? What have you been up to, and what do you do, and how have you come to do what you do today?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I work in Fort Worth, Texas. I love working here in Texas, but I also see clients across the globe with my shamanic background. And what I do is I merge neuroscience, shamanism, and mental health therapy. So I am a mental health therapist and I have my LPC licensure. And I have been merging these three mechanisms with clients. I work with them individually. I also get to host retreats and local events, and I host a meditation group that meets every other Friday. And I am just so stoked with this work because when I see people doing this work from the mind, body, and spirit, I really see their transformation happen on such a deeper and quicker level than I've ever seen before. I love doing it. And I found out about 4 or 5 years ago that my great grandma was actually doing similar type of work to me. And I had no idea. There was something in my genetics that I guess got activated. And I found out that she was working as a curandera, which is a spirit woman, a medicine woman, and she was having to hide her work in caves and doing it at night. The fact that I can do this work boldly out loud is just amazing to me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story with us. It sounds so empowering to be continuing your great grandmother's work, but in a different way today, in a setting that's also very different than her setting was. So thank you for sharing that. What brought you onto this path of combining neuroscience and shamanic therapy? Was there anything that you yourself experienced on this journey, or how did you come to put these things together?
Oh, yeah, such a good question. And I actually have goosebumps you asking me because it came incidentally. It was not something I planned. I had no idea. When I was in college, I worked in a neuroscience research lab, and my undergrad is actually in neuroscience. I fell in love with doing that type of work. And I actually was hoping to work in a research lab, and I did get some job offers, but my mom at the time got into a bad accident. And instead of going and working in research, I actually came back home to take care of her. I didn't know this at the time, but in South Padre Island, where I lived, there was a treatment center there. And they happened to have a neuroscience department in the treatment center. My other degree in my undergrad was psychology. I thought, what a perfect fit. I will go and see if I can volunteer here and get a job. So I did. And I worked in substance abuse treatment for about 8 years, and I became the director of their neuroscience department there. While I was working there, I decided it would be great to do a backpacking trip. I had gone to Costa Rica before, and I decided to go again. And at that time, I had come across working with a couple of their shamans. I was very science at this time. I thought, okay, everything needs some sort of explanation. We need data to prove things. When I got invited to work with these shaman, I really didn't think much was going to happen. Well, what occurred completely shifted my life because I had a vision of a peacock, and I had no idea how it happened, but my subconscious state just got completely altered. And I wanted more. I was hungry for more. So I would go back and I would go spend time with them, and I learned their work. And I decided I'm going to start bringing this back to the treatment center that I'm working at. And I did. And I started conducting shamanic journeys and spirit animal journeys. And the clients were just having this amazing transcendental experience. And the counselors there were asking me, Laura, what are you doing with the clients? Because they're able to dig so much deeper in our sessions. And this is wonderful work that you're doing. It just started blending the neuroscience and the shamanism. And I went back to school and got my master's in clinical mental health. And all of it just came together. And once I left the treatment field, I decided I think it's time for me to build my own private practice. I came here to Fort Worth, and I have been in private practice for about 4 years now, doing this work, merging all three of those modalities.
Wow, this sounds fascinating to me. I'm very curious because you did your undergrad degree in neuroscience and psychology. So you did come from a very science-oriented field. What was that like for you to kind of let go of everything that you had learned and studied and practiced and take that step into shamanism, which is quite different than working in a lab and doing research? What was that journey like for you to come on that path?
I feel even emotional when you ask that question because you ask questions and I can feel they're so deep. So thank you for your depth. I really think what you just described of me working in psychology and neuroscience was more of me being in my masculine. And this shamanic field allowed me to open up to my feminine, which is the more feeling, experiencing, flowing with life. And when that was opened, I didn't have too much data as to why it was so powerful. I just knew it was. And what I started to do is I started to bring the neuroscience to prove that the shamanic side is in fact real. And now, since I've done so much research and have read so many books and have really educated myself on why and how, I can tell a client, this is what's happening when you're doing the shamanic journey and you feel this way and you go into a trance state. Well, your brain is going into this theta brainwave form, which is that high creativity form. Being able to explain what I do in the shamanic realm from a neuroscience lens is really special. And I think the client also appreciates it.
Yeah, I think we tend to write some of those things off as a woo-woo when we're not familiar with it. And I do believe there's such depth and power in a lot of these modalities and approaches. So being able to explain that in a bit more scientific way kind of helps that initial skepticism of coming into that practice. So that sounds wonderful. Now, let's break down a little bit what neuro-shamanic therapy is. We have neuroscience. We have the shamanic approach that you learned when you went to Costa Rica, and also the mental health therapy piece. So what would that look like for a client who comes to you and would like to work on certain challenges? What kind of experience can they look forward to? What does it like to have a session like that?
Everyone's different and their treatment plan is going to look different, but I'll give you an example. I worked with a client and he was at the edge of figuring out what he wanted to do with his life, but he also was in this state of mind that if I can't do this particular plan, then it's the end for me. His plan was, if I don't get accepted into this particular school, I'm done with life. This is all I've ever wanted. And it was this black and white mentality, and it was really harmful for him. I think sometimes we get pigeonholed that way, and we think that we have to have this particular path. And if that path doesn't pan out, then we're worthless. For him, we had to work on worthiness, and we had to work on opening up his mindset. I did a lot of neurocognitive work with him. And I have different tools such as the neurotherapy device, which is the bioacoustical utilization device to help him switch neural pathways, using biofeedback to help him breathe and center himself. But after we did the neurocognitive work, I said, okay, now that your mind has been opened a little bit, let's do some shamanic work. I took him down into a shamanic journey. And whenever we do a shamanic journey, it's also called a flight of the soul. For those of you that are listening and don't know exactly what I'm talking about right now, I'll break it down. So basically, you have a mat on the floor and you're laying on your back in Shavasana pose, and you have a blindfold on, and I lead you into a meditation to get you really relaxed. And the goal here is to go into a trance state. And the beginning of the trance state in your brain is when you go into alpha brainwave form. After the alpha, then we can slip into theta, and then we want to go into delta. Okay. As I'm taking a client and I'm leading them in a meditation, after I've guided them, they are going to go into one of the three different realms that you can go into shamanism. With this particular client, since he really needed to do some inner work, I took him down into the lower world. In shamanism, there's three worlds. So there's the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. The lower world is where we want to journey if we need to figure out our purpose, our mission, what we need to do with our life. So it's more of doing some inner working. I guided him and I told him there's an opening in the ground, and he was able to see the opening. And I told him, okay, it's time to go into the opening. As soon as he went into the opening, I start drumming. And once you drum, it gets you more into that trance state where you're in that theta and delta, and you're in that zone, and your brain is not only restoring itself, but you're also having this highly imaginative, creative experience. And I call it highly spiritual as well, because you've let go and you've let yourself journey, and whatever spirit wants to provide to you, whatever you need to see will be provided to you. The first time I took him down into a shamanic journey, he opened his eyes and he was weeping and he said, "Oh my gosh, I saw myself as a little boy." And he was trying to become a lawyer, by the way. He said, "I didn't want to become a lawyer. This is not what I wanted to do." He said, "I was so imaginative. I loved the stars. I loved planets. And I was so creative. I would do pieces of art." And I said, "What happened to that little boy?" And he was weeping. He said, "I've just been so disconnected from that part of myself." So I said, "Okay, it's time for you to reconnect. Let's reconnect to him." We did. After that, we did shamanic work with ritual and ceremony and having him reintegrate that highly creative, very intuitive. We found out how intuitive he is. And we brought that back into our sessions. And then I would also tell him to do homework and provide different art pieces for me and getting that part of the brain back online. He did. And now I'll fast forward. We did a lot of work together. I think we spent about maybe a year together. And now he goes to Mexico. He just got back from Peru and he actually does healing work himself. So he's become a healer now. And it's been such a cool journey to see him transform in that way.
Wow. Now I'm the one having goosebumps on this. And what a lovely journey for someone to go on and really find themselves and find their alignment again and what brings them joy and purpose in life, which becomes really difficult when you are disconnected from yourself. Then you face a lot of other challenges, physical, mental, emotional challenges. So, wow, what a lovely journey. And thank you for sharing that. I'm curious if you ever run across clients that tell you that they can't visualize, because I sometimes hear that they can't visualize. Is that a challenge for going on a shamanic journey?
No, but I have had clients tell me that, and it is a real ordeal where people cannot see in their mind's eye. I tell these clients to more rely on their sensations. And some people, if their brain is more activated where they're more sensory, I tell them, okay, experience the emotion, the feeling, the vibration of energy. And from that, be able to integrate. So I had one client and he was that way where even throughout our whole work together, I was hoping that maybe his third eye would open. But I don't think it had anything to do with that because he was very intuitive. And the first time he journeyed, he said, "I didn't see a jaguar, but I felt its breath on my skin and I felt it purring and it was definitely there." And he was able to communicate with the jaguar through his mind, like telepathically. And he was able to integrate that into his journey. If we can't see, that's okay. We can also use our sensation perception to be able to know.
That's really interesting. And I think very helpful for people who may have held off on doing certain healing work because they feel like they can't visualize. So that's amazing that there is something else that can be done. Now, I'm curious for what kind of challenges this works really well for. We talked a little bit about this client who was a bit unsure about life purpose and the direction to take, but what other challenges can you address with neuro-shamanic therapy? Are there any things that this works really well for? Some things that might be more challenging? What do you find with your clients?
I don't want to sound egotistical, but all of them. I haven't had a client that hasn't grown or had some transformational work from doing this work. I do think that more challenging for me to work with is somebody who absolutely needs a diagnosis. And what I mean by that, I mean that they need to stay sick. There's some people that psychologically need to hold on to their illness or they need to hold on to the barrier. And those kind of clients I absolutely can work with, but they're most challenging because you can't convince someone that they need to let go of whatever it is if they don't know that they're holding on to a diagnosis because they want to stay stuck. People that do not want to transform, those are the people that probably have the hardest with these sessions. These sessions can be very intense. And of course, I'm very ethical and to make sure that we ease into it. But even so, I have a lot of clients say one of your sessions is like 10 therapy sessions for me. And it's true because we are really going to the source and to the core of the issue. And not only are we talking about it, we're experiencing it in the body, we're experiencing it in the soul. Because it's so intense, people who truly are not ready to transform might find that very scary for them.
And is that safe for people who may have experienced a lot of deep trauma or childhood trauma or abuse? Is it safe for them to go on these journeys? Can you hold their space and guide them through these experiences?
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to say that I will not take somebody on a journey that I have not already worked with and know their trauma and know if they're appropriate for journeying. I know that there are some shamanic practitioners that will go straight into the journey. I don't do that because I do think that it can cause harm to just journey someone. I've heard a lot of people doing also plant medicine when they're not really ready to do the plant medicine part of the journey. And I do think that before we even go there, I want to make sure that the client has coping skills, that they know how to breathe, that they can handle life. I also want to know what kind of day-to-day life they're living, because from working in treatment where you had this incubated setting where you knew they had all the staff they could support themselves with, and they had their therapist, and they had us at the neuroscience department, they're not as supported whenever it's in private practice. You have to remember they're going to go home to their wife and kids. You're probably the only provider that they're working with. And because of that, private practice is more of a slower pace. And you do have to make sure that the person you're working with is ready, and knowing their trauma is really important. So I absolutely make sure that it is safe for them to journey before they do. But even then, even without just going straight into the journey, the type of work that, so I don't know if you've ever been to a therapist that will just sit there and kind of talk about the weather or just chat back and forth. That's just not the type of therapist I am. I know that you came to see me because you want to transform and you want to do the work. So I get us into the work. And some people that are not ready to change are a little taken aback of that if they're used to therapists that are just used to chatting with them.
Yeah, I like the action component of the therapy. So that to me sounds very useful if you're wanting to facilitate a change, because otherwise you do run this risk of the client not moving forward in the direction that they would like to. So I quite enjoy the action component of that you mentioned there. I could see how that can be very, very useful. You have been doing this for quite some time. You have a lot of neuroscience experience as well. So what is your favorite part of doing this work?
You're going to get me emotional. I love seeing a client transform from the time they come in to the time they finish their work. I love being able to remind them of where they started and where they end. For me, it is the biggest high is not the right word. For me, it's a spiritual experience. I love doing this work because you see them little by little, and then in the middle of the work, they're actually being their own therapist whenever they're processing, and they're like, well, oh, that's me self-doubting myself, isn't it, Laura? And I just smile and say, yep. And you get to see that their brain is transforming into healthier neural pathways. And the coolest part for me is not only do you see them change their mindset and their perception and get healthier and healthier and healthier, you see that their world completely changes. They have more abundance coming to them. Their healthier relationships are happening in their life. They're teaching their kids new things. They're learning how to calm. They're handling life different. And because of that, their world completely changes around them. And whenever we started the work, they felt like their life was completely falling apart. That for me is the coolest experience.
And you're touching on a really important part there. And that is, as you mentioned in the beginning, bringing together the mind, body, spiritual aspects and really affecting a transformation that ripples through their entire lives. You're not just looking at a piece that's hurting or a symptom that's occurring. You're helping them affect real change that changes everything in their life to something that they have wanted to walk towards, something positive. So I love the idea of not just picking some symptoms that are occurring, like I have a backache or I don't like my job, but really making changes that are so profound that someone can really say, yes, this changed my life. I actually feel like a better and healthier person now that I've journeyed through this. So thank you for sharing that. I feel like your transformations that you share with your clients are very profound and they affect so many things in their lives.
Yes, they do. And I teach my clients that we are frequency of energy. And once we change our frequency that we're living on, the universe is just responding to that frequency of energy. And everything, like you said, the ripples, everything ripples out. And the response you get from life is different. If we only knew how responsible we were for everything that's happening to us in life, we could realize how powerful we are.
That brings me to another important thing. And that is, as you said, people who are not ready for change or who may be stuck in a bit of a victim mindset. Is there anything that listeners can do if they feel that they are stuck in a place like that? Is there anything that they can do to kind of shift themselves towards more understanding that we do have control and we can affect things in life? Is there anything that you tell your clients about that?
Oh, yeah. I tell them the first step in transformation is awareness, and watching yourself and becoming that observer is the most powerful first step that you can take, is being able to realize and understand, oh, this is how I go into victim mentality. Oh, this is how I'm passive aggressive and not using my voice. Oh, this is how I'm keeping myself down. Oh, that thought I just had about myself that was really critical and mean to myself, that's the stuff that's keeping me stuck. It has nothing to do with my boss, my husband, my wife, my kids. It has to do with the way you are. So I would say for someone who feels like they're stuck, I would say awareness, awareness, awareness. Start to watch your thoughts, how you're living your life, even what you're eating. Are you drinking water? Are you exercising? Are you allowing yourself to do something nice and kind for yourself every day? Start observing, how is this person living their life? Because the person that's stuck is the one that is creating all these barriers for ourselves. And there's no forward momentum because of how we're living our life usually.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought to leave listeners with, is that we can make changes. We can affect changes and transformations. So yeah, I love leaving on that positive note. Now, I am sure that our listeners are very curious on how they could work with you. This has been such an interesting conversation, and the topic has been so inspirational. So, how can listeners work with you? What kind of programs and services do you offer, and how do you work with clients?
I work with clients all over the globe, and I meet them individually, and we use Zoom. And if you would like to work with me, you can get a hold of me on my website, which is dfw-spirituality.com, or you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is dfw spirituality. And I would love to also see you at one of my retreats. That's another way. I actually have one coming up here September 4th through the 9th. And we are going to be in South Padre Island, Texas. So there is an island off of the tip of Texas, and it's awesome. And we'll be there. And the retreat is shamanic training. So if you want to get trained in shamanism, one of my best friends is also a shamanic practitioner, and she comes from a different family lineage than I do. So we're going to combine our family lineages and train people that are coming. If you want to use that in your practice or in your day-to-day life, it's going to be a really powerful retreat. So if you want to get a hold of me, I would love to chat with you about what you're looking for.
Amazing. That sounds like a wonderful experience. And we will make sure that we link to all of that in the show notes as well. And Laura also has her own podcast called The Shamanic Therapist. And you can listen in from your favorite podcast provider and check out some of her episodes for more on what she does. And of course, again, we'll be linking all of that in the show notes. So you can find in the show notes how you can get a hold of her on the website, the socials, find out more about the retreat, and also her podcast. Well, this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into neuro-shamanic therapy as much as I have. What a conversation, and thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us today, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time. I loved being on your show. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. Take care.
You too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.